Councillor Taylor, if you've done your pictures, can we get on with the meeting? Okay. Item 2, I'll just say to the members of the public, you're here to hear the debate, not take part, so please don't intervene. Thank you. All right. Item 2, Goldsmiths Arms. We've got John.
Thank you. This proposal is for redevelopment of the vacant Goldsmiths Arms pub, which is locally listed within the Acton Park Conservation Area and also an asset of community value. This application was deferred at the June Planning Committee to allow for a further period of marketing of the pub building and to enable officers to further scrutinise the application submissions. The application scheme itself has not changed since June. However, the applicants have now provided the results of a further marketing period and details of other pubs and venues for functions and social interaction within the local area. So the site now has been marketed for over 2 years. And in addition, the applicant has indicated they would market the proposed commercial space only for pub or bar units for the next 12 months to further explore the opportunity for a replacement pub. And a condition can be added to secure this. The further marketing since June 2019 produced a further 7 viewings of the site, but did not result in any interest from pub operators and mainly drew out interest from other developers. A 14-day reconsultation was then carried out following submission of the further information by the applicant. And this resulted in 4 more objections and 1 further letter of support, but these did not raise any new issues that haven't been pointed out before. As a reminder of what the scheme involves, the new building will provide 65 flats on the upper floors with 524 square metres of flexible commercial floor space at ground and basement levels. This commercial space could be used for a replacement pub or a mixture of other uses such as shops, cafes, a gym, a community centre or a nursery. All of the proposed 65 flats would be affordable, with a 10-year split of 20% London affordable rent and 80% London living rent. The Council's housing section supports this scheme as genuinely affordable, and it would make an important contribution to meeting local housing demand. Now, it is recognised that this scheme has been subject to a high level of objection from local residents, particularly with regard to the loss of the pub. However, we believe the loss of the pub building is justified by the submitted marketing evidence, which indicates there's not a realistic prospect for this building being reopened as a pub in its current form at a time when many pubs are closing and when the option of the pub being acquired and operated by the local community no longer appears feasible. The current scheme provides an opportunity for a replacement pub operation if an operator can be found. Also, there are a number of other pubs, some with gardens and function rooms, within a reasonable walking distance, which mitigates the loss to some extent. In terms of design, the proposed building at 3 to 6 stories would be higher than many nearby buildings. However, it is considered that a higher building is appropriate at this prominent junction beside an open space. This height would provide the prominence required on the important corner junction, help create a sense of place and provide a landmark on this corner. As the building turns into Friars Place Lane, the height would reduce to 3 stories with a setback 1-storey gable roof to reflect the lower scale of the adjoining houses there. This design has evolved through considerable negotiation with the developer and public consultation with residents, with a number of changes made to reflect this, including reducing the height and changing materials, and is now considered acceptable for this location. Overall, the replacement building is considered to be of good quality in terms of scale, design and materials, and one which should contribute positively to the area. We've also given careful consideration to the pub building being locally listed and within a conservation area. Any harm to a conservation area needs to be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including securing the site's optimum viable use. and on balance we consider the proposed development, along with the benefits associated with it, would outweigh the loss of the pub building and enhance the conservation area. And these public benefits would include bringing a vacant site within the conservation area back into viable use, providing the opportunity for a replacement community pub on the site, given that the existing building appears unlikely to attract a new pub operator, provision of 65 genuinely affordable housing units, and provision of good quality building that's considered to enhance the conservation area. The proposed flats will provide adequate environmental and living conditions in terms of floor space, layout, visual outlook, community space and children's play space. It would not have any unacceptable impacts on the amenity of adjoining buildings due to its reduced height and setbacks on some elevations and the separation distances involved to adjoining properties. In terms of transport, the site has a low public transport accessibility and only 4 disabled parking spaces are proposed. However, various measures are also agreed to mitigate any traffic impacts or overspill parking. These include denying parking permits to scheme residents and the applicant providing a car club scheme. Section 106 contributions for review of the controlled parking zone for cycle infrastructure and works to the public highway at the site's East Acton Lane frontage. And also, under a Section 278 agreement, the developer would improve the junction of Friars Place Lane and East Acton Lane, renew footways along site frontages, and provide an additional pedestrian crossing to the primary school. The scheme also includes a range of renewable energy and energy efficient measures and is acceptable in sustainability terms. So overall, this proposal will provide a number of planning benefits, including providing a significant amount of genuinely affordable units, bringing a vacant site back into viable use, and approximately £355,000 in Section 106 contributions towards local infrastructure. The impact in heritage terms is considered acceptable. So while the loss of the pub is regrettable, on balance, we believe the scheme can be supported, particularly as it offers the opportunity to bring a pub use back to the site. And we also believe that the additional marketing carried out with the further information provided by the applicants adequately addresses the previous reasons for deferral. Thank you.
Okay, we have the objector, Reverend John Westall. So you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Committee members, I'm just one of many local residents who miss the Goldsmiths Arms. The Goldsmiths Arms has been part of East Acton for 200 years. It is registered as a heritage asset. It sits in a conservation area and is listed as an asset of community value and falls under the protection, surely, of the draft London plan. But more than that, it was unique. It was a pub genuinely for the whole community. Yes, there are other pubs 10-15 minutes walk away, but none of them offer a garden with children's play area or a function room with disabled access. Over the last 13 years, I've met so many people from so many different backgrounds in the Goldsmiths Arms. It was used by local football teams, darts and pool teams, various social clubs. Staff from John Perrin and East Acton Primary would meet there on a Friday evening for a drink and a chat. I've attended birthday parties, wedding anniversaries and funeral wakes. I've even watched football with my father there, which is unheard of. Our senior citizens knew if they felt a bit lonely, all they had to do was walk to the Goldsmiths Arms. They would always meet someone they knew. We even put on a Christmas lunch at the pub for those who would be alone Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. As for the garden, it made a huge difference to people's lives. Weekends you'd find families with no outside space at home, sitting outside, watching their children, playing safely together in the pub garden. The pub and garden were very much at the heart of our Queen's 90th and Diamond Jubilee parties. No other pub within miles offers the same facilities and garden. Our local community is currently surrounded by housing developments. Around 850 housing units are in the process of being built, all 5 minutes walk away from the Goldsmiths Arms. Many of us are looking forward to meeting and welcoming our new neighbours from these new units, these new homes. But this will be so much harder without the Goldsmiths Arms, because the Goldsmiths Arms has been a central meeting place in our local community for generations. I imagine over the coming months you will be sitting here working through many more housing developments. Bless you. There really is just this one opportunity to save this pub, which is unique and stands at the heart of the community. And from our own research, we have found certainly other pub owners willing to consider buying the Goldsmiths Arms. Our point is this: what is more valuable for the local community? Is it right for a local community to have somewhere to meet their new neighbours? Because once this is gone, it's gone.
So,
will you help us save the Goldsmiths Arms? Is that okay? Thank you very much.
anybody have any questions for the objector? Simon?
And obviously a crucial thing is about the viability of the pub. And the crucial thing seems to be that the refusal of the late licensing. So was everybody around protesting about the licensing, that they're not extending the licensing? Because that seems to be an important issue.
So I don't fully
the late license. There was something about it.
Okay. Maybe I'll let Hitesh speak about that in time.
Okay.
But thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have for the applicant Mr. Tim Preston from Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing Association.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. My name is Tim Preston. I'm Head of Land for Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing. As you know, this application was deferred in June to allow further marketing to take place and to allow officers to further scrutinise the application and consultation submissions. More than 25 months marketing has now taken place, whereby all of the relevant requirements set out within the draft London plan and the supporting text have been met where possible, given this policy emerged following commencement of the marketing. Furthermore, your packs contain letters from publicans that provide clear rationale why a pub this size in this location is highly unlikely to be profitable. We have an expert publican here this evening who would be more than happy to answer any related questions you may have. Almost none of the inquiries generated by the last two years' marketing campaign have been from pub operators. In fact, with the additional marketing undertaken since June's committee, 90% of inquiries were from developers. This is a pertinent point that needs addressing due to concerns raised by a number of objectors who insist the freehold of the pub should have been marketed. There is no requirement under the draft London plan to market the freehold of the site. If the freehold were to be marketed, the evidence suggests the primary interest would be from developers who would not seek to deliver a fully affordable scheme. It is worth pointing out there was an opportunity via the ACV process for the community interest group to submit a bid for the freehold, however no bid was made. Having seen no evidence to suggest the pub is viable, it is clear the existing pub will not come back into use in its current form. Notwithstanding this, we plan to re-provide a pub on this site, one that is smaller and we hope more viable. I turn now to objections relating to the perceived loss of a community facility and open space. Our additional report maps out the following facilities located within a 15-minute walk from the site. There are no less than 13 other pubs, supplemented by 37 other facilities from cafes, parks, sports halls and church halls. And in terms of open space, the 25-acre Acton Park is located just 300 yards from this site. This is evidence that the site is well served by numerous facilities and may further explain why the pub struggled to perform. And finally, and by no means least, we come to housing. Ealing set a laudable target of delivering 2,500 genuinely affordable homes in the borough by 2022. It's an ambitious target, but one my organisation strongly supports, as I hope everyone here tonight does. This is why the 65 homes we are proposing are all genuinely affordable. 52 homes will be delivered as London Living Rent, which frees households trapped in the private sector not fortunate enough to be able to call on Bank of Mum and Dad or save for a deposit, and 13 homes as London Affordable Rent, which offers those stuck on the council's waiting list access to good quality accommodation at genuinely affordable rent levels. In summary, this is an opportunity to bring back into use a vacant site to once again become an important local hub that serves the community whilst delivering much needed affordable homes.
You just wait a second. Any questions, Councillor Ball?
Yes. How can you say that the draft London plan has no requirement to market it for sale when paragraph 7.7.7 of the draft New London Plan, in the section about pubs, says that if it concludes the business should have been offered for sale locally and London-wide in appropriate publications and through relevant specialisations?
Yeah.
The pub has been marketed.
Sorry, can you...
The pub has been marketed. It was undertaken by CWM, who are a commercial agent, who are appointed by the owners of the site. They've marketed the site extensively for over 2 years now. So we've gone through that process.
My question was about marketing it for sale, which the draft London Plan requires it to be marketed for sale. And as I understand, it wasn't marketed for sale.
It's been marketed. I mean, it's...
The wording of 7.7.7 requires the business to have been marketed. Business had in fact closed as a pub. So it was only possible to carry out the marketing which was undertaken. And bearing in mind this is also supporting text to the draft policy.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Wall?
The officer said there have been 7 viewings since it was deferral. Yes, I'm getting there. I know who I'm talking to. The officer said there's 7 viewings since the deferral, and you mentioned 90% of those have been from developers. Is that correct? So I was just going to ask you, of the 10% that weren't from developers, were they from pubs? And if they were from pubs, are you at liberty to say which pub chain they were from?
I think in your packs you'll find we've got letters from some of those pub chains. Fuller's and Wetherspoons were 2 of the pub operators that showed interest but didn't take their interest any further.
Any other questions? No. Thank you. Okay, we have local ward councillor, Councillor Taylor. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Chair. It's always that usual situation of the housing person arguing against the housing application. It's always going to be difficult, but I am speaking on behalf of the community and on behalf of our fellow ward councillors here today. Let me just put some context, because you have just agreed an application for 900 homes, which is literally about 10 minutes away from this particular site. And in your next application, you agree another 250 units on co-living, which is actually in our ward of East Acton. All within walking distance. You already agreed the home-based development of over nearly 400 units as well. Reverend's already talked about a number of 100 units as well. We've got the Notting Hill development up the road along the A40. To put it in context, 20% of Ealing's affordable housing target is going to be met in East Acton. So just remember that. And I think I said before, this is not a housing site, it was a windfall site. An extra site was never allocated any local plans set aside for housing. So our target of 2,500 homes will not be impacted if you decide to reject this application tonight. I'm also going to report out 2 years ago, as Walpole Ward Councils did lead a campaign to save the allotments in Northfields and building new housing by social housing providers. Similarities are here are very clear. A cherished community asset that stood there for nearly 200 years and a valuable open space. There was a housing crisis then and nothing's changed, it's still the same here today. I'm not going to talk about the importance of community, John Westall's talked about that, but let's just get to the marketing issue. It's been laid out in the informal response that you've been given by Goldsmiths Residents Association in their letter circulated to you this weekend. The owners overpaid the price originally with the sole intention to turn in that value for housing development, and that's the problems you've now got today. We know there are reputable pub operators who put in bids but were ruthlessly outbid. That's the reality. The Residents Association response you've seen and read lays bare the difficulty that potential bidders had in gaining access to a site and the hurdles placed in the way. We've got a couple up there in the gallery who can talk about those difficulties. Unfortunately, they're up there rather than down here right now. So deliberate complications were put in the way to actually access that site. And the applicant has not marketed the Goldsmiths pub, as Council Board's put out, for at least 24 months at an agreed price, following an independent valuation in contravention of that policy, draft policy HC7, the draft London plan. And that policy talks about price and not rent. And it's the freehold that has been marketed and not the short-term lease. So developers knew what they had to do, and they've chosen not to act in that way. And the marketing is quite clear. It's a bit like advertising luxury cars and Hello magazine. It's the wrong market and the wrong audience, and that's why you don't get the response that's expected. So we do refute, as a community, the suggestion there is no realistic prospect of Goldsmiths Arms being used as a pub in the foreseeable future. Fullers do see a future in that pub if they can buy it for a realistic price, not a short-term lease. And as I said, there's a couple up there who think the same as well. The offer of a small marketable pub underneath the flats is just unrealistically. There's no examples anywhere, despite offers, of this ever happening anywhere in London. On the proposals, I'm not going into details because you might need to unravel about the affordable housing offer. You've only got a fifth, which is at London affordable rent. London living rent is a complex model. They may be using a grant, because I know Metropolitan will be given money from the Mayor of London, so you might want to ask some questions about that. But it's a complex model, and I know, because I work in RP in East London on this, they can't make it work, so they flip to shared ownership, but maybe the process might be different in this case. And in Section 106 money, 200,000 for education is not going to be seen in East Acton. Reverend and I have been school governors in East Acton Common. We've had our expansion. There's been a new school at Art Primary. That money is going to go into a pot centrally. The health money is going to go into a pot to pay for the NHS deficit. We're not going to see that money locally, apart from £10,000 for a CPZ possibly. But just in conclusion, this objection is not just ward councillors, it's the community up there and in the ward, and that involves everybody in the community, as well as Rupert Huck and the other candidates, the other main parties, and the GLA member as well. The residents have led a strong campaign that's testament to the spirit of the community at large. Now, we're in the middle of a general election. It's our duty to listen to those residents. And there has to come a point when you step back and ask, what is it we're trying to achieve, given the number of units I referred to earlier on. You can build a house, but you can't build communities, but you could destroy that community.
That's okay, Lynn. Your time's up.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Debreska?
I just want some maybe legal advice what was just presented by the Ward Council and what the applicant mentioned with regards to the marketing, because it just seems it's not correlated unless I missed something. So if I don't know, maybe a legal officer advice. What did happen? What really happened? Did we meet everything?
Well, I don't have. I think probably best if somebody can explain what actually practically happened, and then we just need to compare that with the policy advice, bearing in mind that the policy is not. It's not legislation. You as a committee will just still need to come to a view as to whether or not there is sufficient evidence that there was any reasonable prospect of this being used as a pub. And clearly, the evidence that you've got in front of you at the moment is that it couldn't. But needed is some confirmation of what the marketing exercise consisted of. I think it refers to it being a leasehold offer.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, according to the marketing report, I think the leasehold was marketed at a certain price, although we've been told, but we understand from the applicants that no reasonable offer would have been, or reasonable offers would have been looked at. Just going back to what I said about the draft London plan, though, of course the draft London plan is not adopted yet, and this element is supporting text to it rather than part of the policy. But what it says is the pub should have been marketed as a pub for at least 24 months at an agreed price following an independent valuation. It didn't say the freehold should have been marketed. That doesn't seem to rule out marketing it. The leasehold, from my reading of it. Anyway.
It doesn't necessarily mean that's just simply the freehold, and it will really depend, and others rather than me would know this, is whether or not actually leasehold, there are leasehold sales of pubs, and that's how they are purchased.
Councillor Ward?
I haven't asked anything, and I'm not asking anything at the moment, so go to someone else at the moment.
Councillor, hang on, I've got two. Councillor Woodruff and then Councillor Ball. And Councillor Cox afternoon. Sorry.
I think I'm still not clear about this leasehold v sale situation. I think somebody needs to just clarify that carefully. I think we're still. So, but what I just wanted to ask, Councillor Taylor mentioned about the Section 106 money that it could go to anywhere. What are the rules on how far? I understood it had to be locally, but could it be the whole of the borough?
Yeah, taking the first point first, the issue of marketing is as described by John Robertson in the emerging policy, which is an adopted policy. That refers to a need for there to have been a period of marketing of the business for sale, which can include leasehold interests as well. And so I would take care not to be too prescriptive to say, oh, it's failed that test. I think you've just got to look at the facts as presented to you in the report as to what marketing has taken place and in the light of the policy without being too legalistic about it. Sorry, you're right. You read the policy and then the supporting text that went with it. So the policy itself doesn't refer to marketing any freehold. It talks about the business, marketing the business, and based on the information that's set out in the report, the business was marketed. The exact details of that might not be as much as selling the freehold as a business, but I think you just have to come to a balanced view on what has occurred, what marketing has occurred, and what evidence you've got, and you take that into account. And then in relation to 106, there is a requirement for the use of the 106 money to be used to mitigate in relation to that particular development, and so the purpose for which money will be applied will be local. There is no definition of what local is, but it will be as local as is necessary to mitigate the harm.
Okay, Councillor Ball?
Yeah, on this lease point, are we talking about a short-term lease of 5 years, 10 years or something, or are we talking about a 999-year leasehold? Because they're totally different animals. What was marketed?
Actually, could somebody help there in terms of the marketing? What was marketed in
Flexible
terms of the
lease terms. It was marketed for flexible lease. So anything, we made it very clear that anything would have been considered. Also, just in terms of this draft London Plan policy, this emerged after the site had started being marketed. an independent valuation was undertaken nonetheless, and we made it again very clear that any offers would have been entertained. We also have confirmation from Fuller's that they weren't interested in the site. There was no reference to short leaseholds.
They've sent us a letter saying they would be interested.
We haven't seen this letter. We have correspondence from them saying that they're not interested in it.
It's your letter, you know, your letter.
Hang on. Councillor Taylor, you're not to carry a debate,
There's
okay?
a couple up there who put a bid in. Maybe you should ask
Councillor-
them for their position.
Councillor Taylor, you know that. Please don't.
Can I just add that absolutely everything possible was undertaken in terms of marketing of the pub. There's no point in protecting the pub for the sake of it. What we're offering here is a replacement pub. The pub will not be brought back into use in its current form, and we've comprehensively shown that.
I've got Councillor Cox and then Councillor Watson.
I think the issue with 7.7.7 of the draft London plan is it can be interpreted various different ways. What I'm reading is the part where it says that all reasonable measures have to be taken to market the pub. So what I'm not seeing here is the marketing of the freehold. A second point that I will make is that I represent a ward in Hanwell where our pub closed 4 years ago and it's still sitting there, derelict, empty, and it serves no purpose and serves no one. So there's a risk here, and I'm not seeing sufficient guarantees to say that its future as a pub is guaranteed.
I was just going to say, Chair, there's a danger of a debate that without the committee going on in this room, and I'd rather we just stuck to the committee debating, as others have had their say already. So what I'd say is looking at this, and we've been to the site twice now, and there's a pub that has been closed for, I think it's been marketed for 25 months. I mean, as Councillor Cox said, there's one in our ward that's been, and it's a Fuller's pub, has been closed for 4 years now. The White Hart in Northolt, Fuller's pub, was closed there with a large garden. You know, pubs are closing all over. This one has had 25 months of dereliction or not used. People have moved on, a lot of people have moved on. And it's not just pubs that are closing, it's shops, it's churches, it's the high street that's closing. People are changing their habits. We're talking about communities here, and we're talking about preserving a community. What we're getting is a new community that are moving in. So people that cannot afford to live anywhere else within that community. And it's their sons and daughters of the people probably in the gallery that will use this property in the future, and they won't have to move out of London or out of England or to other continents to be able to afford to live in London. So I think we've got a balance to be struck tonight, and I think on balance, looking at the pub, it's been marketed, the nuances of it, whether it's been freehold or not, is immaterial. If someone really wants to buy it, they would have made an offer by now. And the nuances of that is not really what we should be talking about. What it is, it's a derelict pub, been there for 25 months. We have a chance to get a fully affordable scheme, and we don't get those very often here. In fact, I think it might be the first in our time, and I'd be right behind this. So, and I'm not swayed by people shouting at site visit at the committee. So I am fully going to vote for this tonight.
Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Chair. Most things coming to soon. I think Councillors Wall and Cox make some reasonable points. I think the committee should also remember that down the road, literally down the same road, you don't need to turn off it, was the King's Arms on the corner of the same road in Acton Vale. A large Fuller's pub with a very large garden that closed in July 2013. And, you know, it was a pine warehouse for a while and then was dilapidated and shut for a while and is now, you know, making a contribution to housing stock of the borough. You know, we can go around the houses in terms of what is reasonable and what is not reasonable, and whether a leasehold of 25 years or 30 years would have been more or less reasonable. The simple truth is it's a draft statement of the London Plan with some supporting text that has not yet really been tested. You know, it's not been formally adopted. It's gone through the initial inspection in public, and comments have come back, and you know there's no case law in it yet. You know, there haven't been judicial reviews and challenges in the High Court about what is and isn't reasonable, so we have to make a judgment for ourselves with no external guide for once in our lives. I mean, this is you know, in some ways, you know, we are setting some precedents in terms of our interpretation of that draft guidance. You know, we can look at the owners and say, you know, they let it run down, and you know, the comments from Fuller's, that Councillor Taylor mentioned, and having read the letter, I think Fuller's have hedged all bets possible in terms of saying they'd be delighted to if it weren't so expensive. And you know, they point out that the capital investment required after it sitting there dilapidated, and apologies to colleagues at Hanwell who after 4 years is probably even more capital investment required to reopen that one. The economics probably don't work, and you know, we can talk about the contribution of the overinflated land market in London and the price the developers paid for it in the first place contributing to that, and none of that though is going to solve the matter of what we do this evening. You know, it has been marketed, we deferred it for further marketing. We will never know the discussions that have gone on between potential buyers and the owners. You know, we can't, you know, subpoena those and demand those commercially sensitive conversations to be made public, unfortunately, because you know, it would probably help us a bit. We can be suspicious and conspiratorial all we like, but at the end of the day, the owners of the site haven't got the price they would like for it. So we come to that question in terms of, do we therefore accept that it's not going to reopen, it's commercially unviable, given that a similar pub down the road closed, you know, a long time ago? You'd have expected if in this area that trade would have moved up the road and made this a viable prospect. Clearly it didn't. So then we come to the proposal itself. It's a fine proposal. I mean, look at it, it's 100% affordable housing. It's a bit taller than stuff immediately adjacent, but again, we have to make that trade-off to get that amount of affordable housing. It doesn't cause substantial harm to the conservation area. We've already lost the pub. It's now a matter of what we do with it. And I think on balance, it's acceptable.
Councillor Vaughan. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rice, and then Councillor.
Thank you. My husband and I used to live quite close to the town hall here, and we were renting, and it just cost us a fortune. But we were desperate to buy around this area, just live within our neighbourhood community. We couldn't afford it. But thank goodness, up in Greenford, there was a site where there was an old pub, but it was demolished, and new flats were built. Excellent new flats, 39 flats there. I mean, I don't know at the time if there was any objections that surrounded those flats at the time, but the fact of the matter is, it gave myself and my husband somewhere to live, somewhere that we could afford, somewhere that we could buy, and it's also housed many other families there, and we're very happy. And we've got the solar panels, like we mentioned here, it's all environmentally friendly as well, so it's the same kind of development. So if I benefited from that, I'd be a hypocrite to prevent all the other families from benefiting as well. So I would vote in favour of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Yeah, I mean, the application was deferred for the pub to be marketed, and we've seen that we've already had the discussion about that means, according to the guidance, marketed for sale, and it was only marketed for lease. The application would be a loss of greenfield land in terms of the pub garden, which is accessible to anyone. But obviously, the most important thing is the loss of the community facility, and there are, as Councillor Taylor mentioned, you know, there are hundreds of new residents moving into the area within a short distance, and you know, they need pubs to go to as well. I mean, I give an example not a million miles away. The Castle in North Acton, it used to be a very, very quiet pub, and they've now got hundreds of flats around it. It's now absolutely heaving. You know, I mean, existing pubs become more used when hundreds and hundreds of new people move there. I mean, it stands to reason. And we've talked about the detail around the draft New London plan, but I think it's probably worth looking at the actual draft policy itself. Boroughs should protect public houses where they have a heritage, economic, social or cultural value to local communities, and when they contribute to wider policy objectives for town centre. That doesn't apply. but it also specifically applications that propose the loss of public houses with heritage, cultural, economic or social value should be refused unless there is authoritative market evidence that demonstrates that there is no realistic prospect of the building being used as a pub in the foreseeable future. And when it talks about the pros and cons of different pubs, it specifically mentions pubs in conservation areas as being particularly worthy of saving. And again, the report states that losing the pub would damage the conservation area. I think in terms of the the applicant are talking about providing a replacement pub, but in reality, it's just some space which is, as we heard on the site visit, it's flexible across a whole load of different uses. So it actually could turn into almost anything. That space, it could easily turn into retail or whatever. I think that the central issue of whether it's viable as a pub. I mean, if we turn this application down tonight, then the value of the site drops, and then it drops back to what it would be as a pub, and so then it becomes viable for Fuller's or whoever to buy it as a pub and open it again. The only reason it has an inflated value is because there is a perception that we're likely to give it planning permission. So it's in our hands whether it's viable as a pub or not.
Well, yes, thanks, Chair. I mean, I don't think much really has changed here since the last time we discussed it. Admittedly, a few more months have passed, but the fundamentals of the issue haven't really changed. I mean, we could spend all night discussing whether pubs are viable or not. I mean, the thing is that some pubs have clearly closed, but other pubs are still thriving, including ones that have gardens that are similar to the Goldsmiths Arms. I think it's fair to say that, compared to the King's Arms down the road that closed, this one is held in far more affection by the community, and is much more of a community asset than that one was. So it would be a shame if the site is lost to use as a pub. I accept that the realities of the market are that if there is a realistic prospect of a site of that size being sold for development, then it's going to get a lot more money than anyone is willing to pay for it to run it as a pub. Basically a site on which you can develop housing is much more valuable on one that has to be run as a pub. That is precisely why, we need the policy in the London plan that protects pubs, because without that protection, pretty much all of them could end up going for development. Sadly, when Green King originally sold the site, there wasn't even this sort of draft policy. There was no policy whatsoever to protect it as a pub, and so it was sold, with its development prospects built into the value. And of course, the current owner, having paid that much for it, no matter how long they market it for, they're not going to be willing to sell it for less than they paid for it, unless they absolutely have to. So that's why we've come to this situation. But on balance, I think that we should show that we take the policy on preservation of pubs seriously. If that policy is there, and we have lost quite a few pubs already, I'm inclined to say that we should, turn this application down and hold on to whatever slim chance there is left that it could. Although it is now, I accept, very difficult to see it ever, going back into use as a pub. But I think whilst there is still a chance of that, we should not say goodbye, not completely close the door on it.
can I just come in here? I think we need to be very careful to balance sentiment with objective reality. And the fact of the matter is the policy suite that we use to determine applications obviously is in contradiction, isn't it? We also have a policy which talks about meeting housing need and providing affordable homes. And there is, yes, you're absolutely right, a policy which talks about protecting pubs. And so the decision that the committee has to make has to be an on-balance one. And the evidence in front of the committee is very clear. The pub closed 2 years ago before the applicant acquired the site. Secondly, it has been marketed for 2 years, and you can have arguments about leasehold and freehold, but really we're splitting hairs. It's been marketed for 2 years, and there's been no interest from any pub operator to come in and buy an interest in the land. We also have a further assurance from the applicant that they are prepared to market part of the site as a replacement pub, either one or both units. And it seems to me there is no prospect of the Goldsmiths Arms reopening in its current form. It is closed and it's gone. The best hope, if you want to secure a replacement pub on the site, is to support the scheme and for there to be a further marketing period of 12 months. And I would suggest, Chair, if that helps and if the client is agreeable, I'm sure they would be, because I heard you say this at the site visit on Saturday, that we actually make that a condition of your determining the planning application itself.
This is out of order. I'm sorry, an officer should not be dictating and telling the committee how to vote.
Carter Crawford, it's not the officer is just restating what our objective is. It's not.
Not acceptable.
Sorry, I'll come to you. David Scarfield, our borough planner, he wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't want to extend the debate or our advice. My strategic planning manager has finally detailed the consideration for planning committee, and it is one of balance. It's one of balance, and to use the words of the committee member himself, it's balancing the slim chance of something happening with regard to the pub against other policy requirements. And the policy requirements have been debated. They are there in draft form, in adopted form, to enable planners and committee members and the community to consider these aspects in the round. And I would strongly suggest that that has happened in this particular application, which has been to planning committee now twice. This is the second occasion. But it's also symptomatic, I think, of the way planning and the government and communities are looking at being more flexible and being more savvy about the use of land. And for decades now, we have experienced within planning the replacement of community facilities in terms of the old style community facilities from old buildings on estates incorporated into new developments on such estates. More recently, we have been looking at conversion of pub type uses to places of worship, believe it or not, which is a bit ironic. But we've also looked at the integration of a whole range of other community uses into buildings which primarily will be residential. We look at health, we look at education, and where I come from in Watford, we do have an example of an edge of town centre development which is primarily residential, which incorporates a social club, pub, on the ground floor. I'm raising that point to say that it does actually work, and it works in terms of mixed-use development on a variety of different levels. And I would just reiterate that I think Councillor, just to finish, the committee is asked to take a decision based on the views of the local community and a balance of all the policies, and I think that will be achieved. Thank you.
Councillor Young.
Thank you. I wasn't quite sure of the relevance of Watford to this debate. I wanted to ask a question, please, on the reason justification on page 147, where the argument seems to be that the pub is not considered an important element of the character of the conservation area. Now, I've known the Goldsmiths Arms for, oh golly, over 40 years now. And when I think of the conservation area, that's the building that springs immediately to mind. It's a building around which all the 1930s or interwar development occurred. And it's the main feature of the area. And the question I want to ask is, if that building, which is the heart of the community and the heart of the conservation area, why is it not considered important? It's a locally listed building after all. Why is it locally listed if it's not important?
Okay, I was just wondering whether there's anything linked to that.
Thank you. Well, I think later in the report we actually try and explain why we don't think it's all that important to the conservation area. I mean, and in that group we rely on the conservation area character appraisal report, which actually identifies the important landmarks within the conservation area and the areas of most distinguished character. And the pub isn't falling within any of these. It's obviously of some importance, but it seems less important than others. But particularly, it's not the focus of the conservation area, which is elsewhere, further south. So based on that, which is hopefully an objective view of the merits of different parts of the conservation area, we've taken the view that the pub is less important than other parts of the conservation area, and weighed up the balance accordingly.
Can you just come back on that? Because I think the community is pointing out that it is an important part of the conservation area. It's the heart of the conservation, it's the heart of the community.
Well, you have the report in front of you, so that's the officer's view. You may disagree. Councillor Blacker?
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on the 12-month marketing period. When does that start? So, more pertinently, then when does it end? So presumably there would be a hiatus in marketing it. So would it start and end from the signing of the 106 and the final decision being published, or from today when we make the decision?
Do we have any information?
It's our condition.
I'm wondering whether in terms of...
Yes, we have considered a draft condition, and what I was going to suggest was that it starts from the grant of planning permission, which is after the Section 106 is signed.
I mean, presumably it would be easier to say for a marketed until 1 year after, as opposed to from 1 year, because then it can be marketed sooner, potentially.
It is still being marketed now, but the intention is to continue to market it for a further 12 months if planning permission is granted, and that will obviously, at the moment you'll be making a resolution to grant. The planning permission will only be issued once the Section 106 legal agreement has been signed.
Presumably a unit that does not yet exist and has not yet got permission isn't being marketed. So presumably the pub itself is currently being marketed, but not the units that we would...
Not the replacement pub, yes, yeah. No, you're right. Yes.
So the question is, can it be from 1 year, you know, the condition not being it's marketed for 1 year from, but marketed until 1 year after, such that the applicant could start marketing sooner, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that we can do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nebraska.
I just wanted to say what Councillor Blacker sort of asked was part of my question, but I'm trying to find it where I read in the report, because at the moment what I understand is that the units, if approved, the unit has various classes, or may have various classes if approved. Therefore, there is no guarantee it will be as a pub. So, just to clarify what Councillor Blacker said, with regards to the 12-month thing, which is in the report, is that 12 months to be marketed as a pub, not for any other uses? So only when that's expired, exhausted?
Yes. Councillor Wall?
the site visit on Saturday, the question was asked as well, so that the marketing will be done during the building, not when it's finished. So the unit will not be there. That's my understanding of what the developer said on Saturday. So while the build is going on in a phased fashion, that will be marketed for a year. And I'm just wondering if is that long enough to market this potential? Because if you don't have the shell, I mean, it's on plan, isn't it, rather than in bricks and mortar. I'm just wondering if...
Perhaps I can suggest that we don't have the full facts of when would be the best time to market it and the best way in which to ensure that that marketing period maximises the opportunities for there to be a pub. So what I would suggest is that you delegate authority for it to be in a 106. Sometimes you can have a condition, sometimes you can have a 106, and here I would suggest a 106, which would allow time for us as an authority to understand from our point of view when we think it would be best marketed and understand how and the timing of that, and then to incorporate that within a 106 agreement at that point, because I think we're in danger of second guessing what's the best thing to do at the moment, and it's best to be negotiated once we understand the best way to do it.
Councillor Ward? I would agree with that, as long as it's not less than 1 year.
I think it would be a year, but when that year starts and finishes, I think we need to understand what the best, where the best time is.
And is the applicant agreeable to that? Because you can say yes or no. I can ask a question.
Yes.
Okay, well, they're agreeable to that condition. Yeah. That's fine. Okay, we've had a fairly long debate. It is a balanced debate, so I am going to move to the vote. People need to consider all the issues that have been raised. And can I see all those in favour, please? Sorry. It's including the amendments that we've made in terms of section 106. So can I see all those in favour, please show.